The sound of expensive Italian leather shoes clicking against marble floors echoed through the pristine lobby of Horizon Global Enterprises. But those weren't the shoes making noise today. No. Today, the only sound that mattered was the soft shuffle of worn-out sneakers belonging to a woman the entire 15th floor had learned to despise. Her name was Elena Morrison, though most people in the building simply called her the Maid if they bothered to call her anything at all. Before we dive deep into this absolutely shocking story of hidden identities, revenge, and the kind of justice that makes your heart race, I need you to do something for me right now. Type your country in the comments below. Seriously, I want to know where you're watching from because this story is going viral across the globe, and I need to see how far it reaches. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button because what you're about to hear will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you'll want to be here for more stories like this. Now share this with someone who loves a good revenge story because this one hits different. Elena's day started the same way it had for the past 3 months, at 5:45 in the morning, when most of the city was still wrapped in the comfortable darkness of sleep. She stood in the small apartment she rented in the city's forgotten district, the kind of neighborhood where dreams came to die, and hope was a luxury most couldn't afford. Her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror showed a woman who'd seen better days, someone who carried secrets deeper than the ocean and pain more profound than anyone realized. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, not from the early morning hours, but from nights spent crying into pillows that absorbed her tears and kept her secrets. She tied her hair back into a simple ponytail, the same style she wore every single day. No makeup, no jewelry, nothing that would draw attention. That was the whole point after all, to be invisible, to be nobody. The irony wasn't lost on her, how 3 months ago she'd been someone entirely different, living a life most people only dreamed about. But circumstances had a funny way of reshaping reality, and Elena had learned the hard way that sometimes you had to become invisible to survive. The bus ride to Horizon Global took 47 minutes, cutting through neighborhoods that gradually transformed from rundown to refined, from forgotten to flourishing. Elena watched the sunrise through the smudged bus window, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded her of better times. Times when she'd watched sunrises from penthouse windows with champagne in hand and the world at her feet. Now she watched them from public transportation, clutching a second-hand bag that held nothing but cleaning supplies and the weight of her hidden identity. Horizon Global Enterprises stood like a glass and steel monument to corporate success, reaching 68 floors into the sky. The building housed some of the most powerful people in the industry, people who made decisions that affected thousands of lives with a single signature. Elena had once been destined to walk these halls as an equal, maybe even as a superior. Now she entered through the service entrance, the door that delivery people and cleaning staff used, the door that separated the visible from the invisible. "You're late," snapped Margaret Chen, the floor supervisor who seemed to take personal pleasure in making Elena's life miserable. Margaret was 43 but tried desperately to look 30, with aggressive highlighting in her hair and makeup applied with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. She stood with her arms crossed, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against her designer blouse. "That's the 3rd time this week." "The bus was delayed," Elena said quietly, keeping her eyes down. This was part of the act, part of the survival strategy. Never make eye contact, never challenge, never give them a reason to look too closely. "The bus," Margaret repeated with a laugh that held no humor. "How quaint. Maybe if you managed your time better, you wouldn't have to rely on public transportation like common people." The way she said common people made it sound like a disease. Elena bit her tongue hard enough to taste copper. She wanted to tell Margaret that she'd donated more money to charity in a single year than Margaret would make in a lifetime. She wanted to explain that the watch Margaret wore, the one she bragged about constantly, was a knockoff that Elena could spot from across the room because she owned the genuine version sitting in a safety deposit box downtown. But she said nothing. She just nodded and moved toward the service elevator. The 15th floor of Horizon Global was where the marketing and creative division resided, a sprawling space of open offices, conference rooms, and break rooms that smelled perpetually of expensive coffee and ambition. It was also home to some of the cruelest people Elena had ever encountered. and she'd moved in circles where cruelty was often disguised as sophistication. "Oh, look, the help has arrived," announced Veronica Walsh as Elena pushed her cleaning cart past the main workspace. Veronica was the kind of woman who peaked in high school and spent the rest of her life trying to recreate that glory. 28 years old, moderately attractive by conventional standards, and completely intoxicated by the small amount of power her position as marketing coordinator afforded her. She sat at her desk like a queen on a throne, surrounded by her court of equally vapid followers. "Did you even shower this morning?" Veronica continued, loud enough for everyone in the vicinity to hear. "I swear, every time she walks by, there's this smell." The women around Veronica laughed on cue, like trained seals performing for fish. Elena recognized the behavior. She'd studied psychology at Cambridge, written papers on group dynamics and the psychology of bullying. She understood that Veronica's cruelty came from her own insecurity, that putting others down was the only way she could feel elevated. Understanding it didn't make it hurt less. "I need my office cleaned," Veronica said, snapping her fingers like Elena was a dog. "And I mean actually clean this time. Last time you missed a spot on my window, and I had to spend my entire morning looking at a smudge. Do you know how distracting that is?" "Yes, ma'am," Elena whispered, hating how small her voice sounded. "And take out the trash from the break room," added Jessica Park, Veronica's primary sidekick. Jessica was 26, came from old money, and had never worked a hard day in her life before landing this job through family connections. "It smells like something died in there. Probably your dreams." More laughter, always more laughter. Elena pushed her cart toward Veronica's office, each step feeling like she was walking through quicksand. The office was a shrine to narcissism, with photos of Veronica plastered across every surface. Veronica at company events. Veronica receiving minor awards. Veronica posing with semi-important people who probably forgot her name 30 seconds after the photo was taken. As Elena cleaned, carefully wiping down surfaces and organizing papers, she noticed something on Veronica's computer screen. An email chain. The preview was visible, and Elena's heart stopped when she saw the subject line. "Confidential, Morrison account acquisition." Morrison, her family name, her father's company. Elena glanced toward the door, ensuring she was alone, then leaned closer to read the preview text. It was enough to make her blood run cold. Horizon Global was planning a hostile takeover of Morrison Industries, the company her father had built from nothing, the company that bore her family name and represented 3 generations of hard work and integrity. "What are you doing?" Elena spun around so fast she nearly knocked over her cleaning supplies. Veronica stood in the doorway, her expression a mixture of suspicion and predatory satisfaction. "I was just cleaning the desk," Elena stammered. "Were you looking at my computer?" Veronica's voice was sharp, accusatory. "No, I was just wiping the screen. I didn't—" "You were snooping." Veronica walked into the office, closing the door behind her. "You know what happens to people who snoop, don't you? They get fired. And not just fired, they get blacklisted. No one in the city will hire you if I spread the word that you can't be trusted." "Please," Elena said, and she wasn't acting now. The desperation in her voice was real. "I wasn't looking at anything. I was just cleaning." Veronica studied her for a long moment, then smiled. It was the kind of smile a cat gives a mouse before the final pounce. "You know what? I believe you. You're too stupid to understand what you were looking at anyway. But just to make sure you learned your lesson." She reached for the cup of coffee on her desk, yesterday's coffee that had gone cold and bitter, and without warning, poured it directly onto Elena's uniform. The liquid was cold, but the humiliation burned hot. Elena stood there frozen, feeling the coffee seep through her shirt and drip onto the floor she'd just cleaned. "Oops," Veronica said with mock innocence. "How clumsy of me. You better clean that up before it stains my carpet." Elena wanted to scream. She wanted to grab Veronica by her designer collar and tell her exactly who she was dealing with. Instead, she dropped to her knees and began wiping up the spilled coffee with paper towels from her cart, her hands shaking with suppressed rage and humiliation. "That's a good girl," Veronica said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Stay on your knees. That's where people like you belong." As Elena cleaned, she made a decision. This couldn't continue. Something had to change. She'd come to Horizon Global for a reason, working undercover to understand the company from the inside before making decisions that would affect not just her future, but the futures of thousands of employees. But what she'd discovered was more disturbing than she could have imagined. The rest of the day passed in a blur of similar humiliations. Marcus Webb, a junior executive who compensated for his inadequacies with aggression, deliberately knocked Elena's cleaning cart over in the hallway, sending supplies scattering across the floor while his colleagues laughed. Susan Rodriguez, the department head, who should have been a voice of reason, simply looked the other way, more interested in protecting her own position than defending someone she viewed as beneath her notice. By lunchtime, Elena retreated to the janitorial closet on the 15th floor, the one place she could be alone. She sat on an overturned bucket, pulled out her phone with trembling fingers, and opened her encrypted messaging app. There was one message waiting, from the only person in the world who knew where she was and what she was doing. "How much longer?" the message read. "This is destroying you." Elena typed back quickly. "Just a few more days. I need to understand the full picture." The response came immediately. "They don't deserve your empathy. Come home. Please." Elena closed her eyes, fighting back tears. Home. The word felt foreign now, like a language she'd once spoken fluently, but had somehow forgotten. Home was a penthouse apartment overlooking the city. Home was Sunday brunches at restaurants where the waiters knew her name and her order. Home was safety and love and a future that sparkled with promise. But home was also where she'd been 3 months ago, when she'd received the phone call that changed everything. When her father, Maxwell Morrison, had suffered a massive stroke that left him partially paralyzed and unable to speak clearly. When the board of directors at Morrison Industries had begun circling like sharks, seeing opportunity in tragedy. When she'd realized that the only way to save her father's legacy was to understand the threats from the inside. That's how she'd ended up here, working undercover at Horizon Global Enterprises, the company that was orchestrating the hostile takeover. The plan had been simple: get hired as cleaning staff, move invisibly through the building, gather intelligence about their strategies, and use that information to protect her father's company. What she hadn't planned for was the casual cruelty of people who saw her as less than human. What she hadn't expected was how much it would hurt. A knock on the closet door made her jump. "Elena?" a male voice called. "You in there?" She quickly wiped her eyes and opened the door. Daniel Kim stood in the hallway, one of the few people in the building who treated her like a human being. He was 32, worked in IT, and had the kind of face that suggested he'd been the smart kid in school who everyone overlooked until they needed help with homework. "Hey," he said gently, "I saw what happened in the hallway earlier, with Marcus. I wanted to check if you were okay." "I'm fine," Elena lied automatically. "No, you're not." Daniel's expression was earnest, concerned in a way that felt genuine rather than performative. "Look, I know we don't know each other well, but I've seen how they treat you. It's not right. Have you considered reporting it to HR?" Elena almost laughed at that. HR at Horizon Global was a joke, a department designed to protect the company rather than its employees. She'd overheard enough conversations while cleaning offices to know that complaints went into a black hole where they disappeared forever. "It's fine," she repeated. "I can handle it." Daniel looked like he wanted to argue, but instead he just nodded. "Okay, but if you ever need anything, or just someone to talk to, I'm usually at desk 17, the one with too many action figures on it." "Thank you," Elena said, and she meant it. In a building full of cruelty, even small kindnesses felt monumental. The afternoon brought new torments. Elena was cleaning the executive break room when Veronica and her crew came in for their daily gossip session. They spoke about Elena as if she wasn't there, as if she was a piece of furniture rather than a person with feelings and ears. "I heard she lives in the Brookside district," Jessica said, referencing the neighborhood everyone knew was code for poverty and crime. "Can you imagine? I wouldn't go there even in daylight." "Maybe that's where she gets her fashion sense," Veronica replied, examining her nails with exaggerated interest. "Goodwill chic." "Do you think she has a family?" asked another woman, Stephanie, who Elena had previously thought might possess a shred of decency. "Like, is there someone at home wondering why she's so pathetic? God, I hope not, Veronica said. Imagine inheriting that level of failure. The genetic tragedy alone would be criminal. Elena's hands tightened around the spray bottle she was holding. She imagined turning around and telling them everything. She imagined revealing that her pathetic life included a trust fund that could buy and sell their families multiple times over. She imagined explaining that her genetic tragedy included a mother who'd been a renowned surgeon and a father who'd built a business empire on integrity and innovation. But she said nothing. She just continued wiping down counters, invisible and silent. That evening, as Elena finally escaped the building and headed toward the bus stop, her phone rang. The caller ID made her heart leap. Alexander Blackwood. She answered immediately, stepping into a quiet alcove away from the evening crowds. Elena, his voice was deep and warm, with just a hint of the British accent he'd never quite lost despite years in America. How was your day? How was her day? How did she even begin to answer that question? It was fine, she said. Another lie in a day full of them. Lena. Only he called her that, and only in private. I can hear it in your voice. What happened? Alexander Blackwood was the man who'd turned her world upside down 2 years ago when they'd met at a charity gala in London. He was the CEO of Blackwood International, one of the largest conglomerates in the world, a man whose net worth was discussed in billions rather than millions. He was also the man who'd asked her to marry him 6 months ago, offering her a ring that cost more than most people's houses and a future that promised safety, love, and partnership. I'm just tired, Elena said, which was at least partially true. She was tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of being invisible. Tired of absorbing cruelty like a sponge absorbs water. Then come home, Alexander said firmly. End this investigation. We have enough money to hire entire teams of corporate lawyers to fight the takeover. You don't need to subject yourself to this. It's not about the money, Elena replied, leaning her head against the cool brick wall. It's about understanding them. If I'm going to beat them, I need to know how they think, how they operate. I need to see the machinery from the inside. At what cost? Alexander's voice held a rare note of frustration. Every day you spend there, they break off another piece of you. I can hear it. You don't sound like yourself anymore. I'm fine, she insisted, even though they both knew it was a lie. When was the last time you slept through the night? When was the last time you smiled? Really smiled? Not that fake thing you do for survival? Alexander paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer. I miss you, the real you, the woman who laughs at terrible jokes and debates philosophy at midnight and dances in the kitchen while making breakfast. Elena felt tears threatening again. I miss her too. Then come back to her. Come back to me. Soon, Elena promised. Just a few more days. There's something happening. Something big with the Morrison account. I can feel it. Once I understand their strategy, I can come home. Alexander was quiet for a moment, then sighed. Fine, but I'm coming to the city this weekend. No arguments. We're having dinner, a real dinner, somewhere far from that building and those people. Agreed? Agreed, Elena said, managing a small smile despite everything. I love you, Lena. Remember that when things get dark. You're not alone in this. I love you too, she whispered. After they hung up, Elena stood in the alcove for several more minutes, gathering the strength to face the bus ride home, the empty apartment, the long night ahead. She thought about Alexander, about the life they were building together, about the future that waited on the other side of this nightmare. What she didn't know was that tomorrow would change everything. The next morning started with an email that sent shockwaves through the entire 15th floor. It arrived at 8:30, just as Elena was beginning her rounds, pushing her cart through the hallways while invisible to the people scrambling around her. Did you see? Jessica practically shrieked, running to Veronica's desk. Did you see the email? About the merger? Veronica was already on her feet, phone pressed to her ear. This is huge. This is career-making huge. Elena's heart rate accelerated. She moved her cart closer to the cluster of excited employees pretending to clean an already clean window while listening intently. Blackwood International, Marcus was saying to a group gathered around his desk. They're considering acquiring Horizon Global. Can you imagine the opportunities? Blackwood is one of the biggest companies in the world. Elena nearly dropped her cleaning supplies. Blackwood International. Alexander's company. What was happening? There's going to be a site visit, Veronica announced, reading from her phone. Next week, Alexander Blackwood himself is coming here. The actual CEO. Oh my God, I need a new outfit. I heard he's like absurdly rich, Stephanie added, and young. Only 34. And supposedly gorgeous. And engaged, Jessica said with obvious disappointment, to some mysterious woman no one's ever seen. There are literally no photos of her anywhere. It's like he's hiding her, or she's not real. Elena felt like she might faint. Alexander was coming here, to this building, to this floor. She'd known he was considering business deals in the area, but she had no idea Horizon Global was on his radar. Did he know she was here? Was this some elaborate rescue attempt? The morning dissolved into chaos as the 15th floor transformed into a hurricane of preparation. The merger possibility with Blackwood International represented the kind of career opportunity people spent lifetimes chasing. Suddenly, everyone cared deeply about appearances, about presentations, about making the perfect impression. And in the middle of it all, Elena continued pushing her cart, continued being invisible, her mind racing through possibilities and implications. You, Veronica snapped, pointing at Elena. I need my office to be absolutely perfect, spotless. Blackwood's team might tour the floor, and I can't have it looking like a disaster area. Can you handle that, or is that too complex for you? I can handle it, Elena said quietly. Good. And while you're at it, the conference rooms need to be immaculate. I'm talking white glove inspection level. If I find a single speck of dust, you're done. Understood? Elena nodded and began working with renewed focus. As she cleaned, her mind spun through the implications. Alexander was coming here. Her fiancé, the man whose ring she wore on a chain hidden beneath her uniform, was going to walk these halls. Would he acknowledge her? Would he blow her cover? Or would he play along, treating her as invisibly as everyone else? The thought of seeing him made her heart ache with longing and anxiety in equal measure. 3 months felt like 3 years. 3 months of separation, of hiding, of pretending to be someone she wasn't. What if he saw what this place had done to her? What if he realized she wasn't the same woman he'd fallen in love with? Days blurred together in a frenzy of preparation. The 15th floor underwent a transformation that would have been impressive if it wasn't so superficial. Every surface gleamed. Every paper was filed. Every employee suddenly cared deeply about presentation and professionalism. Veronica was unbearable during this period, her anxiety manifesting as even more aggressive cruelty than usual. She snapped at everyone, but reserved special venom for Elena, who she seemed to view as a potential embarrassment. If Blackwood's people see you looking like that, Veronica said on Thursday afternoon, gesturing dismissively at Elena's uniform, it reflects poorly on all of us. Try to make yourself scarce during the tour, okay? Hide in a closet or something. Yes, ma'am, Elena replied, keeping her expression neutral while internally cataloging this moment for future reference. Thursday evening, her phone rang again. Alexander. I arrive tomorrow afternoon, he said without preamble. I've been reviewing the Horizon Global files. Interesting company. Very interesting, Elena agreed carefully. She was on the bus surrounded by strangers, unable to speak freely. I noticed something curious in their current projects, Alexander continued, and Elena could hear the controlled anger in his voice. They're targeting Morrison Industries for acquisition, hostile takeover, rather aggressive strategy. I know, Elena said softly. I've been watching it develop. Lena, this changes things. If they succeed in taking over your father's company, the implications are… I know, she interrupted. That's why I'm here. That's why I need to see this through. Alexander was quiet for a moment. Tomorrow, when I'm there, we pretend we don't know each other. Is that what you want? It has to be that way, Elena said, her heart breaking. Just for a little longer. This is torture, Alexander admitted. Knowing you're in that building, being treated like… He couldn't finish the sentence. I'm stronger than you think, Elena said, trying to convince both of them. I can handle this. I know you're strong. That's not what worries me. What worries me is what you might do to them once this is all over. Despite everything, Elena smiled. Should I be insulted that you think I'm capable of revenge? Darling, I've seen you negotiate business deals. I know exactly what you're capable of. Those people have no idea who they've been tormenting. Friday morning arrived with the energy of an impending storm. Elena showed up at 5:30, even earlier than usual, wanting to complete as much cleaning as possible before the Blackwood International team arrived. The building hummed with nervous energy. Security had been increased. Executives who normally never visited the 15th floor were suddenly everywhere, offering advice and criticism in equal measure. Veronica arrived at 7, a full 2 hours before her usual time, wearing a dress that probably cost more than Elena's monthly rent. She clearly visited a salon, her hair and makeup professionally done, her entire presence screaming desperation to be noticed. Remember, Veronica said, grabbing Elena's arm as she passed with her cleaning cart. You're invisible today. If you see the Blackwood team, you turn around and go the other way. Got it? Got it, Elena confirmed, gently extracting her arm from Veronica's grip. The morning crawled by with agonizing slowness. Every few minutes, someone would rush past with an update. They've arrived at the building. They're meeting with the executives on 60. They're heading down to tour the various floors. Elena positioned herself in a storage alcove that offered a view of the main hallway. Her heart hammered so hard she thought others might hear it. She'd removed the chain with Alexander's ring from beneath her uniform and slipped it into her pocket, not trusting herself not to reach for it unconsciously. At 11:47, she heard them approaching. A group of people, their voices confident and professional, discussing metrics and growth potential. And then she saw him. Alexander Blackwood walked like he owned the world, because in many ways he did. 6 feet 3 inches of confidence and intelligence wrapped in a custom suit that probably cost more than a luxury car. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his expression serious as he listened to the Horizon Global executives flanking him. But it was his eyes that captured Elena's attention. Those dark eyes that had watched her across a ballroom 2 years ago and decided she was worth pursuing. Those same eyes swept past her without a flicker of recognition. Elena's breath caught in her throat. She knew this was the plan. She knew they'd agreed to pretend they were strangers. But actually experiencing it, actually having the man she loved look through her as if she was invisible, it hurt in ways she hadn't anticipated. As you can see, Mr. Blackwood, our facilities are state-of-the-art, Edward Morrison, the VP of Operations, was saying. No relation to Elena, though the shared surname always gave her a bitter laugh. We've invested heavily in creating an environment that fosters creativity and productivity. Impressive, Alexander replied, his voice professionally neutral. Though I've always believed a company's true value lies in how it treats all its employees, not just the ones in corner offices. Something in his tone made Elena's heart race. There was an edge there, carefully controlled but unmistakable. The group moved closer to where Elena stood, and she instinctively pressed herself further into the alcove, trying to be as invisible as Veronica had demanded. And your staff retention rates? Alexander asked, stopping directly in front of where Elena was partially hidden. Excellent, Edward replied quickly. We have very low turnover in our professional positions. And your support staff? Cleaning? Maintenance? Security? Edward looked momentarily confused by the question. I'm sorry? Your support staff, Alexander repeated, enunciating each word clearly. The people who keep this building functional. What are their retention rates? How do you ensure they're treated fairly? What are their advancement opportunities? Well, I'm not sure I have those specific numbers, Edward admitted, clearly uncomfortable. But I'm sure HR could provide. You don't know. Alexander's voice was sharp now, cutting. You run a company with over 3,000 employees, and you don't know how you treat a third of them. The hallway had gone quiet. People were staring. This wasn't how these tours usually went. Veronica, never one to read a room correctly, chose this moment to insert herself. Mr. Blackwood, I'm Veronica Walsh, Marketing Coordinator. I've prepared a presentation on our upcoming campaigns that I think would really interest you. Alexander's eyes finally moved, landing on Veronica with an expression Elena recognized. It was the look he gave people he'd already dismissed, people who didn't register as worthy of his time. I'm sure you have, but I'm more interested in understanding the company culture. How people treat each other when they think no one important is watching. Our culture is exceptional, Veronica gushed, apparently immune to social cues. We're like a family here. Everyone supports everyone. A family, Alexander repeated, and Elena heard the skepticism. Interesting. In my experience, companies that claim to be families are often the ones with the most toxic environments. Real families support each other. They don't have to advertise it. Elena bit her lip to keep from smiling. She'd forgotten how brutal Alexander could be when he wanted to be, how precisely he could dismantle someone's false pretenses with just words. I'd like to speak with some of your support staff, Alexander announced suddenly. Randomly selected, no preparation. I want to understand their experience working here. Edward looked like he'd swallowed something unpleasant. Mr. Blackwood, I'm not sure that's necessary. It's absolutely necessary, Alexander interrupted. If I'm going to consider a merger, I need to understand this company from every angle, not just the angles you're comfortable showing me. His gaze swept the hallway and landed, apparently randomly, on Elena's alcove. You there? Yes, you with the cleaning cart. Come here, please. Elena's heart stopped. For a moment she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Then training kicked in. The months of playing this role, of being invisible and submissive. She stepped forward slowly, keeping her eyes down. What's your name? Alexander asked, his voice gentler now, but still professionally distant. Elena, sir, she said quietly. Elena, how long have you worked at Horizon Global? 3 months, sir. And how would you describe your experience here? The hallway had gone completely silent. Elena could feel Veronica's panic, could sense Margaret's fury, could practically hear the collective held breath of everyone watching. This was it. This was the moment. She could blow everything wide open right now. She could tell Alexander everything, could watch the satisfaction in Veronica's eyes turn to horror, could end her cover and expose the rot in this company. Instead, she said, "It's fine, sir. Everyone is very professional." Something flickered in Alexander's eyes, too fast for anyone else to catch. Disappointment, pride, understanding. Fine, he repeated. That's an interesting word choice. Not good, not great. Fine. He turned to Edward. Do you find it acceptable that your employees describe their workplace as merely fine? I think she's being modest, Edward stammered. We have excellent employee satisfaction scores. From your professional staff, I'm sure. Alexander looked back at Elena. If you could change one thing about working here, what would it be? This was dangerous. Elena knew it. She could see Veronica practically vibrating with the need to intervene, could see Margaret making mental notes for future punishment. But Alexander was giving her an opening, and some part of her, the part that had been beaten down and humiliated for 3 months, couldn't resist. I think, Elena said carefully, still not meeting his eyes, that sometimes people forget that cleaning staff are people too. We see things. We hear things. We're not invisible, even though people treat us like we are. You see things, Alexander said softly. Like what? Elena finally looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time. Like how people act when they think no one important is watching. The air in the hallway crackled with tension. Alexander held her gaze for a moment longer, and Elena saw everything she needed to see there. He understood. He'd known what he'd find here, had known what was being done to her, and he was giving her a choice. She could end it now, or she could see it through to whatever conclusion she'd been working toward. Thank you, Elena, Alexander said, dismissing her with a nod that was somehow both professional and intimate. That was very enlightening. Elena returned to her alcove, her hands shaking. She'd survived the first encounter, but the day was far from over. The Blackwood International tour continued, but the energy had shifted. Alexander asked pointed questions, made observations that clearly made the Horizon Global executives uncomfortable, and generally behaved nothing like the rubber stamp approval they'd been expecting. As the group moved away, Elena heard Veronica's voice, low and venomous. That stupid Maid nearly ruined everything. Did you hear what she said? Who does she think she is? She was answering his questions, Daniel Kim said, appearing from an office. What was she supposed to do, lie? She was supposed to keep her mouth shut, Veronica snapped. God, I'm going to make her life hell for that. Elena's jaw tightened. She was tired of being invisible, tired of being silent, tired of absorbing cruelty like it was part of her job description. The afternoon brought a development that changed everything. Elena was cleaning the executive conference room, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, when she overheard voices from the adjacent office. The walls were thin, probably never designed with the assumption that anyone who mattered would be listening from the cleaning staff's side. The Morrison acquisition has to happen fast, she heard Edward say, before Blackwood figures out the connection. What connection? Another voice, female, probably Susan Rodriguez. Elena Morrison, the daughter, has been missing for 3 months. The board thinks she's dead or ran off. Without her, Morrison has no clear successor. Maxwell Morrison is incapacitated, can barely sign his own name. It's the perfect time to strike. Elena's blood ran cold. But if she surfaces, Susan began. She won't, Edward interrupted. We've had people looking. She's gone. And once we acquire Morrison Industries, we'll merge it with our operations, strip the valuable parts and sell off the rest. We're talking billions in profit. And Blackwood doesn't know. Why would he? It's just another acquisition target to him. He doesn't know the personal history, doesn't know about the daughter. We're keeping it quiet until the papers are signed. Elena's hands clenched into fists. They were planning to destroy her father's legacy, to dismantle everything he'd built, and they thought she was dead or gone. They thought there was no one left to fight back. They were wrong. She pulled out her phone and quickly recorded the rest of the conversation through the wall, capturing every damning word. This was it. This was what she'd been waiting for. Evidence of their intentions, their strategies, their complete disregard for ethics or humanity. But she needed more. She needed something that would hold up legally, something that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. That evening, Elena didn't go home. She told her supervisor she needed to finish a deep clean of the conference rooms, work that would take hours. Margaret complained but ultimately approved the overtime, probably calculating that paying Elena's minimal wage for extra hours was cheaper than hiring a professional cleaning service. Once the building emptied and security settled into their night routines, Elena made her move. She'd studied the building's layout during her months there, had learned the blind spots in camera coverage, had watched where people kept keys and passwords written down despite all security protocols. She started with Veronica's office. The computer password was laughably easy to crack. Veronica had written it on a post-it note stuck to the bottom of her keyboard. Elena found exactly what she was looking for. Detailed files on the Morrison Industries acquisition, including financial projections that showed Horizon Global planned to liquidate most of the company's assets after acquisition. She transferred everything to an encrypted flash drive, covering her tracks carefully. Next, she moved to Edward Morrison's office. This was riskier, as his office was on a more secure floor, but Elena had learned over 3 months that security guards often got complacent during night shifts. She used her cleaning access to take the service elevator to the executive floor, moving quietly through the darkened hallways. Edward's office was a treasure trove. He'd left his computer unlocked, probably confident that no one important enough to understand what they were seeing would ever be in his office after hours. Elena found communication with board members at Morrison Industries, people who were supposed to be loyal to her father, but were instead conspiring to sell the company out from under him. She found bribery evidence, falsified documents, and email chains that detailed exactly how they planned to manipulate her father's medical condition to declare him incompetent. She was so focused on downloading files that she almost didn't hear the footsteps in the hallway. Elena froze, her heart hammering. The footsteps were steady, purposeful, coming closer. She looked around frantically. There was nowhere to hide in Edward's minimalist office except under the desk, which would be the first place anyone would look. The door handle turned. Elena did the only thing she could think of. She grabbed a cleaning spray bottle from her pocket and began wiping down Edward's desk, acting like she was supposed to be there. The door opened, and Daniel Kim stood there, looking equally surprised to see her. "Elena," he said, "what are you doing here?" "Cleaning," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "They wanted the executive floor done tonight." Daniel's eyes moved to the computer screen, which still showed the files she'd been accessing. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "That's not cleaning," Daniel said quietly. He stepped into the office and closed the door behind him. "What's really going on?" Elena made a split-second decision. "I'm gathering evidence of fraud, conspiracy, and a planned corporate takeover that violates about a dozen laws." Daniel stared at her. "You're a corporate spy? Something like that. For who? A competitor? The government?" Elena took a breath. "For myself. They're targeting my family's company. I've been working undercover to understand their strategy." Daniel's expression shifted from surprise to understanding to something like respect. "Morrison Industries. You're Maxwell Morrison's daughter. That's why you reacted when you saw the files on Veronica's computer." "You knew." "I suspected. You don't move like a cleaning person. You don't talk like someone with no education. And the way you look at people when they're cruel to you—" Daniel shook his head. "I've seen that look before. It's not fear. It's calculation." "Are you going to turn me in?" Elena asked, her hand moving subtly toward the flash drive, ready to run if necessary. Instead, Daniel moved to the computer and began typing rapidly. "I'm going to help you. Edward Morrison, no relation to you, I assume, has been running illegal side operations for months. I've been documenting them because I'm not actually IT support. I'm FBI." Elena's mind reeled. "You're FBI?" "White-collar crime division. We've been investigating Horizon Global for securities fraud, but we didn't have evidence of the Morrison Industries angle." He pulled out his own flash drive and began transferring files. "This changes everything. With what you found and what I have, we can bring down the entire operation." They worked quickly, copying files and covering their tracks. Daniel showed her evidence she hadn't even known to look for. Financial crimes that went far beyond the Morrison Industries takeover. "Why didn't you say something earlier?" Elena asked as they worked. "When you saw how they treated me?" "Because I'm supposed to be undercover too. I couldn't blow my cover without endangering the entire investigation. But watching what they did to you—" Daniel's jaw tightened. "That was harder than I expected. You didn't deserve that." "No one deserves that," Elena said. "That's what they don't understand. They think some people are worth less than others. They think being cruel is a perk of success." They finished copying files just before midnight. Daniel showed her a service exit that avoided most of the security cameras, and they separated with an agreement to meet the next day to coordinate their evidence. Elena rode the bus home in a daze, the flash drive in her pocket, feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She had everything she needed, evidence of fraud, conspiracy, and cruelty. But more than that, she had a decision to make. She could take this to the authorities, to lawyers, and destroy Horizon Global through legal channels. Or she could do something more direct, something more personally satisfying. At home, she called Alexander. "It's done," she said when he answered. "I have everything." "Thank God," Alexander breathed. "Come home, please, let's end this." "Not yet," Elena said. "I need you to do something for me. Anything." Monday morning announced that Blackwood International is withdrawing from the merger consideration. Make it public. Make it clear that your ethics assessment found Horizon Global to be incompatible with your company values. "Consider it done," Alexander said immediately. "What else?" "Then I need you to personally attend the board meeting at Morrison Industries. My father needs to see a friendly face. Can you do that?" "Of course. Lena, what are you planning?" Elena smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "I'm planning to show them exactly who they've been tormenting. I'm planning to make sure they never forget what happens when they underestimate people." "I love you," Alexander said. "You're terrifying and brilliant, and I love you." "I love you too," Elena replied. "See you Monday." The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. Elena worked with Daniel to organize the evidence, coordinating with his FBI contacts to ensure everything was documented properly. She met with her father's lawyers, showing them the proof of the conspiracy. She planned every detail of what would happen Monday morning. Sunday evening, she did something she hadn't done in 3 months. She went to her real apartment, the penthouse she'd abandoned to go undercover. She showered in her own bathroom with expensive products. She did her hair and makeup professionally. She chose an outfit that cost more than most people spend on wardrobes, a power suit in midnight blue that fit like it was painted on, because it had been custom made. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Not because she looked different, but because she looked like herself again. Elena Morrison, daughter of Maxwell Morrison, fiancée of Alexander Blackwood, and the woman about to teach an entire company the most expensive lesson of their lives. Monday morning, Elena arrived at Horizon Global at exactly 8:30. She didn't use the service entrance. She walked through the front doors like she owned the place, which in a few hours she effectively would. The lobby security guard looked confused. "Miss, can I help you?" "I'm here to see Edward Morrison," Elena said pleasantly. "Tell him Elena Morrison is here to discuss the acquisition of Morrison Industries." The guard's eyes widened. He made a call, spoke in hushed, urgent tones, then turned back to her. Uh, Mr. Morrison says he doesn't have a meeting scheduled." "He does now," Elena interrupted. "Call him back. Tell him if he doesn't see me in the next 5 minutes, my next stop is the Securities and Exchange Commission. He'll understand." 2 minutes later, Elena was in the elevator, riding up to the executive floor. The same floor she'd cleaned just days ago. The same floor where people had treated her like she was invisible. When the elevator doors opened, Edward Morrison was waiting, his face pale, his expression somewhere between panic and fury. "What is this? What are you doing here?" "I work here," Elena said sweetly. "Or I did. You might remember me better like this." She pulled out her phone and showed him a photo of herself in her cleaning uniform. "Your company has a real problem with employee treatment, Edward. You should look into that." She watched the blood drain from his face as he realized who she was, what she'd been doing, how thoroughly he'd been played. "You," he whispered, "you were the maid. You've been here all along." "For 3 months," Elena confirmed, "learning everything about your company, including your illegal plans to destroy my father's business." She held up the flash drive. "I have copies of everything. Every email, every document, every conversation. I know about the bribes, the falsified reports, the conspiracy with the board members. All of it." "You can't prove anything," Edward said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Actually, I can. The FBI is already reviewing the evidence. But that's not why I'm here." Elena smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who'd finally cornered her prey. "I'm here to watch your face when you realize what's about to happen." As if on cue, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her smile widened. And there it is. Alexander Blackwood just announced publicly that Blackwood International is withdrawing from any potential merger with Horizon Global, citing severe ethical concerns and evidence of corporate malfeasance. Your stock is going to tank, your investors are going to panic, and by end of day, this company's value will be a fraction of what it was Friday. Edward's phone began ringing. Then it started buzzing with text messages. Then more calls. The same thing was probably happening to every executive in the building. "But that's not all," Elena continued, enjoying herself now. "Morrison Industries board has called an emergency meeting. Several members have resigned this morning, probably hoping to avoid federal charges. My father, despite his health issues, will be addressing the remaining board with his lawyer present. The hostile takeover is dead." "You can't do this," Edward said, his voice rising. "You have no authority." "I have all the authority I need. I'm Maxwell Morrison's heir and the majority shareholder of Morrison Industries. Something your conspiracy conveniently forgot to verify." Elena leaned closer. "You assumed I was dead or missing. You treated me like I was nothing. You never bothered to check who you were stepping on." Behind Edward, the elevator doors opened again, and Veronica stepped out. She took one look at Elena, perfectly dressed and confident, and her face went through a remarkable series of expressions: confusion, recognition, disbelief, and finally horror. "Oh, good," Elena said. "Veronica, I was hoping I'd see you." "You," Veronica stammered. "You're the maid. Why are you dressed like someone with power? Like someone who matters?" Elena finished. "Because I am both of those things. I'm Elena Morrison, daughter of Maxwell Morrison, and I've spent 3 months documenting every instance of workplace harassment, discrimination, and abuse on the 15th floor. Congratulations, Veronica. You're about to become famous." Other employees were starting to gather, drawn by the commotion. Elena saw Marcus, Susan, Jessica, Margaret, all the people who'd made her life hell, all the people who'd never bothered to wonder who she really was. I want all of you to remember this moment, Elena said, her voice carrying through the growing crowd. Remember what it felt like to have power over someone you thought was powerless? Remember how easy it was to be cruel when you thought there were no consequences. She paused, looking each of them in the eye. Because those consequences are here now. This is insane, Veronica said, trying to rally. You can't just waltz in here and what? Hold people accountable. Elena's voice was sharp now. Watch me. The FBI is currently obtaining warrants for multiple arrests. The SEC is launching a formal investigation, and I'm personally filing a civil suit against Horizon Global for workplace harassment and discrimination. Every conversation I overheard, every email you thought was private, every cruel comment you made thinking I was too stupid to understand, it's all documented, all evidence. The crowd had gone silent. But more than that, Elena continued, I want you to understand something. Every person you dismiss, every person you treat as invisible, every person you step on because you think they don't matter, they're all someone. They all have lives, families, dreams, and dignity. You don't get to take that away because you have a fancy title or a nice office. Margaret was crying now. Marcus looked like he might be sick. Susan had backed away, probably calculating whether she could claim ignorance. Elena Morrison! The new voice came from behind her. Elena turned to find Alexander Blackwood stepping out of the elevator, looking impeccable as always, flanked by two men in FBI windbreakers. Mr. Blackwood, Elena said, and the way she said his name made several people gasp. Thank you for coming. I wouldn't miss this, Alexander said, moving to stand beside her. He looked at the assembled crowd with the kind of cold contempt usually reserved for particularly nasty insects. I want to make something very clear to all of you. Ms. Morrison is my fiancée. The woman you've been tormenting for 3 months is the woman I plan to marry. The woman I love more than anything in this world. He took Elena's hand and she realized her finger was bare. Without breaking eye contact with Veronica, Alexander pulled a ring box from his pocket and slid Elena's engagement ring back onto her finger, where it belonged. So when you treated her like she was nothing, Alexander continued, his voice deadly quiet, you weren't just mistreating an employee. You were attacking my future wife, my partner, my equal. And I promise you, that is something I will never forgive or forget. The FBI agents moved forward. Edward Morrison, you're under arrest for securities fraud, conspiracy to commit corporate espionage, and approximately 17 other charges that will be formally presented. You have the right to remain silent. As Edward was read his rights and handcuffed, Elena felt a wave of satisfaction so intense it was almost dizzying. This was justice. This was what happened when you underestimated people, when you treated humanity as disposable, when you thought cruelty came without cost. The rest of you should lawyer up, Daniel Kim said, appearing from the crowd in his FBI jacket. We'll be conducting interviews with everyone on this floor. Those of you who participated in the harassment and discrimination are looking at potential civil liability. Those of you who witnessed it and did nothing, well, that's going to be an interesting conversation with HR and legal. The crowd began to disperse, people scrambling for their phones, their lawyers, their excuses. Veronica remained frozen, tears streaming down her face, her perfect makeup running in black streaks. Why? She whispered, looking at Elena. Why didn't you just tell us who you were? Elena considered the question. Because if I had told you, you would have treated me differently. You would have been fake and nice and professional. I wanted to see who you really were, Veronica. I wanted to understand what kind of person you are when you think there's no one important watching. And now I know. Now everyone knows. She turned to Alexander. I want to go home now. Then let's go home, he said, wrapping his arm around her waist. They walked to the elevator together, leaving chaos in their wake. As the doors closed, Elena caught one last glimpse of Veronica's horrified face, and she felt no guilt. Only the quiet satisfaction of justice served. In the lobby, as they headed toward the exit, Alexander pulled her close. Are you okay? Really okay? I will be, Elena said honestly. It's going to take time to process everything that happened, but knowing that they'll face consequences, that they can't hurt anyone else the way they hurt me, that helps. I'm so proud of you, Alexander said softly. What you did, working undercover, gathering evidence, staying strong through all of that treatment, it was incredible and terrifying. Mostly terrifying. Please never do anything like that again. Elena laughed, a real laugh that came from deep in her chest. I promise, one undercover investigation is enough for a lifetime. Outside, a car was waiting. Alexander's driver opened the door, and Elena slid into the familiar luxury of the back seat. As the car pulled away from Horizon Global, she looked back at the building one last time. 3 months ago, she'd entered that building as someone invisible, someone people thought they could hurt without consequences. Today, she left as herself, whole and vindicated, with evidence that would destroy the careers of people who'd thought themselves untouchable. What happens now, Alexander asked. To Morrison Industries, to your father? Dad's meeting with the board today. The conspiracy is exposed, so the loyal board members will remain and the traitors are gone. We'll need to rebuild trust and stabilize operations. But the company is safe. The legacy is secure. Elena squeezed his hand. Thanks to you. If you hadn't done that ethics assessment, if you hadn't given me that opening during the tour, I might not have gotten the final evidence I needed. I knew something was wrong the moment I walked onto that floor, Alexander said. The energy was toxic, and when I saw you standing there, trying to be invisible, it took everything in me not to burn the whole building down right then. I'm glad you didn't. This way was better. This way they know exactly who brought them down and why. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, Elena processing the morning's events. Eventually, Alexander spoke again. What will you do now? Go back to Morrison Industries full-time? Focus on the recovery? Elena considered the question. Eventually, yes, but first I think I need some time to heal. 3 months of being treated like that, it leaves marks. Not visible ones, but they're there. I need to remember who I am, remember what I'm capable of beyond survival. Then we'll take all the time you need, Alexander said. We'll go away if you want. Somewhere quiet where no one knows us, and you can just be yourself without performing or hiding or being anything other than Elena. That sounds perfect, Elena said, leaning her head on his shoulder. Her phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. 15 arrests so far. The DA is calling it one of the biggest white-collar crime busts of the year. You did good. Elena smiled and showed the message to Alexander. 15 arrests, he said with satisfaction. That's a good start. What about the civil suits? Those will take time, but I have the best lawyers money can buy. More importantly, I have documentation of every instance of harassment and discrimination. The legal team thinks we could set precedent in employment law. Elena's expression turned serious. I want to do something with this, Alexander. I don't just want to win a lawsuit and move on. I want to make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to other people. What are you thinking? A foundation, maybe. Something that helps workers document workplace abuse, that provides legal support for people who can't afford fancy lawyers, that educates companies on the real cost of toxic culture. Elena sat up straighter, her mind already racing with possibilities. We have resources, connections, and now we have a story that will get attention. We should use that. We should, Alexander agreed, and we will. But first, you need to rest. You need to process. You need to be kind to yourself the way you want others to be kind to each other. They arrived at Elena's penthouse, and the familiarity of it made her eyes sting with tears. 3 months might not seem like a long time, but it had felt like an eternity. Walking through her own door, seeing her own furniture, smelling her own space, it was overwhelming. Alexander seemed to sense her emotional state. Why don't you take a bath, put on comfortable clothes, and I'll order from that Thai place you love? We can spend the rest of the day doing absolutely nothing. That sounds like heaven, Elena admitted. Later, after the bath and the food and the comfort of being home, Elena and Alexander sat on the balcony overlooking the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in those same shades of orange and pink Elena had watched from the bus window. But now they looked different. Now they looked like promise instead of resignation. I've been thinking, Alexander said, about what you said, about making sure this doesn't happen to others. Yeah? What if we start with Blackwood International? A complete overhaul of how we treat support staff. Better wages, better benefits, clear advancement opportunities, And most importantly, a culture that respects everyone regardless of their job title. Elena turned to look at him, this man who'd supported her through an impossible 3 months, who'd loved her enough to let her fight her own battles while standing ready to help however she needed. You'd do that. Lena, watching what they did to you, knowing that happens every day in companies around the world, I can't unsee that. I can't pretend I don't know. So yes, we'll start with my company, make it a model, and then we'll use our platform to push other companies to do the same. Real change, not performative diversity statements and empty gestures. I love you, Elena said, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. I love you too, Alexander replied. My fierce, brilliant, terrifying wife-to-be. They sat together as the sun set completely and the city lights began to twinkle below. Tomorrow would bring more battles. The legal proceedings, the media coverage, the difficult conversations with her father about what she'd done and why. But tonight, Elena allowed herself to just be, to be home, to be safe, to be loved. Her phone buzzed one more time. A news alert. Horizon Global stock plummets after FBI arrests and Blackwood merger collapse. CEO and multiple executives charged with fraud. Elena showed it to Alexander, and they both smiled. Do you think they understand now? Alexander asked. What they did wrong? Some of them will, Elena said thoughtfully. Some people are capable of growth and change. But others, people like Veronica and Edward, they'll always believe they were the victims. They'll tell themselves stories about how they were unfairly targeted, how they didn't do anything that bad, how everyone treats people that way. That's sad. It is, but it's also not my responsibility to fix them. I did what I needed to do. I exposed the truth, gathered evidence, and made sure there were consequences. The rest is up to them. They stayed on the balcony until the night grew cold, then moved inside where Elena felt truly comfortable for the first time in months. As she lay in her own bed that night, Alexander beside her, she thought about everything that had happened. 3 months ago, she'd made a decision to sacrifice her comfort, her dignity, and her peace of mind to protect her father's legacy. It had been one of the hardest things she'd ever done, enduring cruelty and humiliation day after day while pretending to be powerless. But she'd done it. She'd survived. And more than that, she'd won. Tomorrow the media would probably try to paint her as either a hero or a villain, depending on their perspective. Some would say she was brilliant. Others would claim her methods were deceptive. People would debate ethics and tactics and whether the ends justified the means. Elena didn't care. She knew the truth. Sometimes the only way to defeat monsters was to walk among them invisible until you understood their weaknesses. Sometimes the only way to prove systematic cruelty was to experience it firsthand. Sometimes the only way to create real change was to sacrifice yourself on the altar of truth. And she'd do it again if she had to, but she really, really hoped she'd never have to. As she drifted off to sleep, warm and safe and home, Elena's last thought was of all the people still out there, working jobs where they're treated as invisible, absorbing cruelty from people who think position equals permission to harm. She thought of the cleaners and the servers and the delivery drivers and everyone else society told them didn't matter. And she made a silent promise to every one of them. I see you. I remember what it's like. And I'm going to fight like hell to make sure things change. Because that's what you do when you've walked through hell and come out the other side. You turn around and you make sure the path is better for everyone who comes after you. Elena Morrison, once invisible, now unforgettable, slept peacefully for the first time in 3 months. And in the morning, the real work of changing the world would begin. But that's another story. For now, let me ask you something. Where are you watching this from? Type your country in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story has reached. And if this story moved you, if it made you think about how you treat people or how you've been treated, hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because stories like this, stories about justice and resilience and the power of standing up for yourself, these stories matter. They remind us that no one is truly powerless and that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their job title or social status. Now tell me, what part of Elena's story shocked you the most? What would you have done in her situation? Let's talk about it in the comments. And remember, be kind to everyone you meet. You never know who they really are.